Welcome to round one of round robin competition of the Georgia Farm Bureau Federation Young Farmers and Ranchers Discussion. I'm Matt Bodford of the Georgia Farm Bureau Young Farmer and Rancher State Committee, and I'm from Scriven County. I'll be serving as your moderator and room host for this round. At this time, I respect all competitors, please turn off your cell phones and all other electronic devices. Also, please keep distractions as minimal as possible to allow for full concentration by the competitors. In the event of continual distractions, it may be necessary as room chair to ask you to leave. At this time, we would like to invite anyone who will be taking photographs during the competition to sit in the front row. Serving as timekeeper for this round is William Moses of Lawrence County. The round robin allows state competitors to be evaluated on their discussion of 2 of the 5 topics. Competitors' cumulative ranking from the rounds 1 and 2 will be used to determine the placement of the top 16 competitors. The winner of each of the semifinal rounds will be advanced to the final 4. The judges, timekeeper, and competitors have been briefed on the rules of the competition. Now that all of y'all have been seated, writing is allowed. As mentioned, the competition have been briefed on the competitors have been briefed on the competition and realized that their general discussion should be directed toward each other rather than the audience. In my role as moderator, I will not attempt to control or direct the discussion. Remember, the discussion is meant to resemble a committee meeting with the end goal of determining a possible solution to a question at hand. This is not a panel discussion which point, counterpoint, and active moderator. As such, I will not intervene until very or inappropriate remarks are made. With that in mind, the burden is on the competitor to moderate themselves and conduct in a cooperative and cordial manner. The question for this round is, agricultural use uses water for everything from growing crops, raising livestock, and moving products to and from farm and ranches. Water issues are often highly debatable and are unique to each region and can pose significant challenges to growers. How can Farm Bureau help address water management challenges and seek long-term solutions for farmers and ranchers? The competitors for this round are Vincent Thomas, Jack Pringle, Michael Howard, Rachel Dunaway, I'm sorry, I cannot see. Carly Jones. We will begin this discussion with a 30-second opening statement from each competitor. Following the opening statement, there will be 25 minutes of open discussion, followed by 1 minute of quiet time for each competitor to prepare their 1-minute closing statement remark. The official time is set by the timekeeper. Competitors in voluntary order make a 30-second opening statement. Please stand and direct your opening statement to the audience. The timekeeper will indicate when your 30 seconds has elapsed by holding up a red card. You may begin.
Well, 60% of the human body is made up of water. 92% of a watermelon is made up of water. But 100% of agriculture is dependent on water and proper water management practices. I'm looking forward to a conversation with my colleagues today about how Farm Bureau can effectively advocate for proper water management practices in our state.
Well, good morning. As our own GFB president, Tom McCall, likes to say, we don't necessarily own the land, we're just borrowing it from future generations. I believe the same to be true about resources like water. While we don't own the water, we are just borrowing it from our neighbors downstream so that we can produce the food and fiber they need. I look forward to discussing with you some ways that Farm Bureau can move the needle toward long-term water goals. Hello, I'm Rachel Dunaway, and today I'm excited to have this discussion meet with y'all. I think Farm Bureau addresses water management challenges by really honing in on your emerging technologies and continued research to help support farmers and ranchers. I look forward to our discussion.
Water and agriculture go together like peanut butter and jelly. Without water, farmers can't really grow much, which is why the water management debate is so important in our industry. And with the innovations in modern technology, we have been able to develop ways to grow more crops while using less water. And I believe with the help of Farm Bureau acting as a network of connections, we can widespread this problem all across our industry.
Good morning. Water is the most important natural resource in need of protection. In agriculture, we use it to grow and process our crops, our livestock, and to transport those products to the consumer from our farms and ranchers. I look forward to speaking with all of you about ways that we can use technology to help it make it more sustainable, and how we can go about updating our storage facilities and making sure. Thank you.
You've heard the opening statements. You can better name out and proceed with discussion. You better please direct your discussion to your fellow panel members. At 20 minutes, time signal will be with a yellow card, and that will indicate 5 minutes remaining. At 25 minutes, the red card will go up, and we will say time expired. Please begin.
Vincent, I did a lot of research on emerging technologies, and I found a lot of stuff on like new drip irrigation and humidity sensing technology. What kind of new technology did you find on the research?
Like you talked about drip irrigation, pretty much I did a heavy amount of my studying on how to reduce the use of water. We talked about a lot of farmers and ranchers, it being important. However, I think that Farm Bureau can reach out and try to work with folks who aren't on the farm to help them reduce the reuse, because eventually I would love to talk about maybe a water credit, some type of system that Farm Bureau can get behind, where we're allowing farmers to use the resources that we need them to use, and then consumers to cut back, so that as a whole, as a team, we're not using as much water.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I found like a study in the boiler industry by the University of Arkansas, where they use the cooling mats to cool the boilers down, but then they also did that low pressure drip or sprinkler system to help keep the birds cool, and they like reduce their water usage by just keeping the birds cool and the houses cool by like over 2/3. It was like insane how much money they were saving on the water.
That was a great point, Ms. Dunaway, but I read that as well, that farmers who use drip irrigation actually save up to 40% more water, which I think is an amazing innovation. I believe with Farm Bureau, if we can get in our education systems, I know that students would love to be able to innovate new and improved drip irrigation systems for our farmers to use to save even more water.
Jack and Rachel, kind of talking about so many advanced technologies. I think when you kind of look at it in the big context, technology is what has driven agriculture forward and made us more sustainable as an industry. And I think that's kind of what we're hitting on, is ensuring that we're sustainable with our water usage, which is the foundation of why we're using technology, is to be more sustainable, use less water, so our rivers aren't drying up, and so that the rest of the world can also drink water. And Jack, you brought up a point about bringing in those new technologies to Farm Bureau. Jack, in what ways do you think that Farm Bureau can better effectively communicate new technological innovations, so that we as an agricultural industry can say, as we always have, that we're proactively conserving water for the rest of the world and for the future?
So yeah, thank you, Michael. But I think that Farm Bureau, we can spread out this knowledge using social media. Of course, is huge in our generation, but I also believe real world experiences mean so much more to people. So we can get people to come out to our local water authorities, to our rivers, to our natural reservoirs, and see how it's affecting our farmlands and agriculture. I think that can make a great impact on our generation to save more water.
Speaking more on the education side of it, like you brought up, Jack, a lot of times people aren't as aware of the opportunities to help them with water management systems or even with grants. So a lot of the things that I found, and it's personal for me, back in 2012, our family farm was fortunate enough to get a pretty decent sized grant that allowed us to build a reservoir on our property. It paid for about 1/3 of the reservoir. And we thankfully had a person on our staff who was very familiar with grant writing. However, not everybody is that fortunate. So I think in addition to all these, education programs and technology that you guys are talking about, Farm Bureau could produce a grant writing program for young farmers and ranchers that would allow us to learn more about the best ways to write these grants out so that we can be more effective and hopefully earn more grants for things like new water systems or reservoirs on our farms that ultimately really help save water. So I know that we didn't have to drill a well right where we were because we were able to use that reservoir and continue to use it over and over. And it's just using that day-to-day rainwater rather than having to pull from a well.
That's awesome. I totally agree with that. I was really thinking about how many people still rely on that high pressure irrigation system. About maybe if we could figure out how Farm Bureau can partner and do maybe some grants or really push legislatively to have grants available to us so that we can change that high pressure irrigation systems like your low pressure irrigation system or your drip technology.
I like how Farm Bureau gave us questions that flow into each other, and that's more fun. You know, pretty much like this is about water. We're talking about funding, which is capital, you know, and that's a great thing. I'm trying to not get my notes mixed up, but as far as the water goes, I'm wondering how would Farm Bureau go about doing these classes? You talked about social media. I think if we're talking about folks who are allowed to come to this competition, that's a good way, webinars, things like that. But what about the, you know, more seasoned farmers? What about our grandparents?
I think that certainly comes in play at our local Farm Bureau meetings. That's kind of the town hall local agriculture is our local Farm Bureau meeting, not just young farmers and ranchers meetings, but conventions and conferences like this are wonderful opportunities to kind of disseminate new technologies that can improve farmers' bottom lines and improve our state agriculture. But I think really informing at the district level, district managers, so that they can communicate that information to local offices and kind of, I guess, work backwards down the grassroots that Farm Bureau is to kind of reach back out to those farmers. Would probably be a wonderful way to communicate that information, connect one-on-one that information. Carly, you brought up wells a little while ago about digging of wells. It kind of reminded me that you know, a large portion of Georgia is still under a well moratorium. In the Flint River Basin, in 2012, a well moratorium was enacted when it was in the drought, drying up the Flint River, and that moratorium has still not been lifted, all the way from just south of Atlanta at the airport, all the way down to the Lake Seminole at the corner of Georgia. And so I think about just recently, 2 weeks ago, the frost reduction permit program was just enacted by the EPD to allow for the first time wells to be permitted in the Flint River Basin for the specific purpose of blueberry and citrus frost production, and allowing farmers to drill those wells only for the purpose. They can drill the well, only have it for when frost reduction would be needed. And so this is, I think, seen as a first step for Georgia Farm Bureau about re-accessing the Flint River water basin. And I was just kind of wondering what you thought about, you know, you had experience with water and wells and reservoirs, what you thought about the Farm Bureau's work of tapping back into the Flint River water basin sustainably.
Sure. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I actually spoke to a friend a couple of days ago who was down in South Georgia, and he mentioned that some Farm Bureau staff were actually there. And so, ironically, we're going to talk about elected officials later today. Like you said, that all ties in together. It's so important that we have, you know, the public policy folks in place here at Farm Bureau because they're attending meetings like this. They're really voicing the opinions of other farmers, but I think they are doing the best work they can to get this moratorium lifted. You know, and I think we can work with even other trade associations and industry lobbyists to kind of push the needle forward. Because yes, I think grant programs and education, like I mentioned earlier, are great to get the individual farmers educated on how to apply things like this, but it doesn't matter if there's not opportunities at the state and federal level for us. So I think, like you're mentioning, having this Farm Bureau staff in place that can attend these meetings in Southwest Georgia and really all over the state and even at the federal level will help us in the long run to get some of these issues lifted. And it ties back into that technology too. I know one of the quotes that I saw said that yes, back in 2012 when this moratorium was placed, it did make sense, but now we have so much better producer knowledge and technology in place to where we're not doing as much damage on drilling those wells. And like you're saying with the citrus and the blueberry blueberry industry, it's really vital for those late spring freezes to get those wells in the ground to help prevent some issues for our food fiber that we need every single day. So I think Farm Bureau is already doing a great job, but I think, you know, on our level, we can make sure that we've got the correct public policy people and lobbyists in place to move that needle forward.
So Michael, I love how you brought up the local Farm Bureau meetings because that's my favorite time of the month because we get to sit around, eat the best cornbread in town and just sitting down and talking with those farmers that have way more knowledge than me. It is such a much better experience just talk with them for an hour and a half than me sitting 8 hours at school because I learned so much about the agricultural world from their firsthand experience. So I really love how you brought that up.
I'm gonna kind of spin off a little bit. So you talked about how like the blueberry farms, I know y'all dealt with frost a lot in South Georgia. So I kind of read it as in, even though like with wells and access to water, maybe looking at more on the plant side of things. So really pushing that research for water efficient varieties. So like of course the water management issues, you either don't have enough or you have way too much, right? Either pushing our education or our industry really to really promote all those, either those drought tolerant or those water efficient varieties to producers. And usually, you know, people, I don't think it's promoted as much because I think, you know, the irrigation people want to keep the money, you know, it's just kind of, you know, how the politics and the capital work with a whole bunch of things. But I thought Farm Bureau could really push that to the industry and also to the producers on the water efficient varieties.
Rachel, I really like what you brought up that point, and it kind of brought me with our continuing improved crops themselves. I recently spoke to a Corteva rep who said they have a seed that was developed 2 years ago, and it's gonna, I can't remember what crop it was, but it's going to allow for a whole bunch of less water usage with the same yield. And the problem with that, and which is wonderful, it ties perfect to this topic, is reducing water through that specific advancement of technology. And the problem is the EPA labeling office, and it has sat in for 2 years in the office. So while it may be a unique approach, and while sometimes the EPA may seem hostile to agriculture, how do you think Farm Bureau can advocate for targeted funding for EPA to ensure that our technological advancements aren't just lost in a slowdown in the federal government?
I think really what Farm Bureau needs to do is really get those big corporations like your suppliers. I talked to someone from American Soybean Association. I can't remember his two big reps. And where I'm at locally is a lot more animal related, not necessarily crops. So I can't remember which ones he said, but he was pretty much saying that they've had this technology since like the early 2000s, which is crazy. And the EPA and a few other entities kind of kept them on the down low because they're like, oh, you know, we don't get as much money for this and that. But I really think if Farm Bureau can push industry and partner with industry, be like, look, this is the future for not only farmers, but for, you know, our growing population and also for this hot topic on water usage. And like you said in your opening statement, everybody uses water, like there's no way around it. So I think if Farm Bureau could really target that and all of us locally as well, reach out to our elected officials and all that stuff about how we need to really be a unified front in promoting these technologies.
I like that you're saying that, and I feel like a lot of times farmers and ranchers do get a bad rap in regards to land use and water use. You know, the general public a lot of times thinks that we're just wasting all of our water, we're drilling wells and we're drying up streams just to use for our crop, which, you know, it should be a good thing technically because we're providing their food and fiber, but you know, that's not really our goal. So water is so vital from produce to animals, any form of agriculture out there, and farmers really are the best you know, generators of renewable resources. So I mean, we're doing our best to get, you know, more water, you know, back in the reservoirs and not use as much. I mean, we've come a long way from drip irrigation, like you were saying earlier. So I think Farm Bureau is assisting us and can continue to assist us in painting the picture that farmers really are doing a good work and just wasting this water. So I think in addition to all the things that we've talked about, painting a picture and helping us, you know, make our elected officials, like you're saying, and even just the general public understand that we're not here to waste water. We're actually wanting to preserve it and utilize it best we can.
Yeah, the Georgia Department of Agriculture is the oldest in the country, so we need to be the leaders. They need to look up to the elder, and you know, we need to lead in here in Georgia. So I think all of these things that we're talking about will set us up to be the leaders.
And then, I'm sorry. So then Rachel and Michael, you guys brought up those innovations with at the seeds on the like molecular level to make them drought resistant. I was reading up on those and I read that soybean and maize, they have a couple of varieties that are drought resistant crops as well. And it's used with osmotic adjustment for the plant can flux how much water is getting in. I think that the Farm Bureau can push that more to get those down. I think the EPA can finally realize that a lot of their regulations, they're not necessary for our farmers, because there's no one, like Carly said, there's no one who cares more about the earth than farmers. And that's just a fact.
And to build off that, I would, just gonna chime in, and farmers use the earth to make their bottom line. So I mean, of course, farmers are, interested in sustainable, well-being, and, I think just the technologies that are out there are certainly our solution. I think where Farm Bureau comes into play is communicating that, and I think that's what we've been hitting on, all of us, about how Farm Bureau can connect, to, the technology side of that industry and disseminate that information, without, you kind of get hairy with, favoring one chemical company over the other, but ensuring just that we're communicating again from the top all the way to our local offices, those local meetings. And I think it would even add value to Farm Bureau, and not that we're not already doing, but continuing to grow that is going to add value to Farm Bureau and help increase our membership at the local level, and across the state. And I think we've hit on a lot about policy. We talked about the EPA and how we can ensure that we work as partners and support them as they kind of give us regulations with which we can work. And as I think about another side of policy, I turn the conversation to, I was researching about water in Georgia, and we certainly have our fair share of problems, but I think I'd be remiss if we didn't say that the water issues that we have in Georgia are relatively minor compared to those that they have out west in other parts of the country. I think just to acknowledge that we're blessed in that regard, I think that we always should be approaching more and more solutions to resolve our problems. But one kind of on the flip side, not necessarily a problem, but something that I think we can tap into here in Georgia that relates directly to ag is our port in Savannah and proper water management there, because 1.25 million metric tons of poultry were shipped through the port of Savannah last year. And it is the second most connected port in the U.S., just behind LA. It's the most on the East Coast, and it's right here in our backyard. So I guess I'll asking you, how do you think Farm Bureau can advocate for proper water management use down there to ensure that that's a asset to our Georgia products that ship out across the world?
I want to jump in there. First off, like, you're doing so great, and like I don't want to interrupt you, like saying so many things. Farmers love the land, like we said. The thing is, our issues are regional. So a farmer in West Georgia doesn't really care what a farmer in Florida needs for their oysters when I need that water, and I'm sure we'll talk about that when we talk on the next question. But also, in talking about Savannah and that river, well, the rivers that feed the Savannah River are in North Carolina. So, one day we need North Carolina to do something for us. So, I mean, I think that when we talk about our issues, they're so regional that we're not thinking about the EPA has to see it from a bigger scope. So sometimes I think we are harsh on the EPA, just like, folks who see it from a bigger scope are harsh on farmers. So I just wanted to go ahead.
I like that you brought up North Carolina about how the rivers stem from there, because that's how our water system works, is that we're dependent on each state. And I really see an opportunity there. Is I know the Savannah River is not as big as a problem in that regard. I live on the Savannah River. We don't have the same fluctuations that other rivers do, especially Flint and Chattahoochee, that's caused issues before. But I think about, it kind of came to me as you said that, how can the Farm Bureaus, the different state Farm Bureaus, work together to ensure that each federation's members are represented and have water, but that we can ensure, because in reality, we're still all agriculture, and people in Decatur and Seminole County aren't but a 5-minute drive from port. So that's their neighbors. And how can Farm Bureau, I think, ensure that we are working with our other federations and working with the American Farm Bureau to ensure that that we're good stewards of our rivers, and other states are and ensuring that we're okay as well.
Goes back to education. I always feel like I end up back there, but it really truly does. And making sure, like we're saying, I totally agree. And I said it earlier, you know, that farmers truly are the most sustainable. You know, ag is the most sustainable industry, farmers are the most sustainable individuals. However, it's making sure that they're educated on safe and, you know, proper practices to ensure that they are getting the most out of their water. So, Vincent, like you were saying, it's not just here in Georgia, like we have to unify as a whole, you know, country to make sure that all of our state farm bureaus are providing farmers with the proper education to, you know, get those good water systems in place. And I don't know if that's through programming here at Young Farmer and Rancher or in our local, like you mentioned, Jack, local farm bureau meetings. And that's probably the best route because yes, Young Farmer and Ranchers are the future of the farming and agriculture industry. However, we do still have people like my older brother and my dad, farmers who are handling our irrigation practices every day. So I think the proper education from state to state and to know that we're all really pulling toward the same goal. I mean, we're not trying to take water from Florida or North Carolina. We're really just pulling toward the same goal to, you know, utilize our courts as much as possible.
Carly, I love how you brought up education again, because at the beginning of the summer, I had to teach astrobotany to middle schoolers. So we had to over the problem that there's not a lot of water and space to grow plants. So we had to come up with innovative ways to grow our plants. So we talked about aeroponic system, hydroponic, aquaponics, and they then got their own decision to make a hydroponic system and see it work. They used a hydroponic lick system, which shows that in these urban areas, because we know Georgia's turning more urban by the day, it's getting bigger and bigger, but they can show that you don't need acres of land to grow and save water, because hydroponic systems save 90% more water than traditional farming, which still amazes me.
I think that's a wonderful opportunity to just tap into new industries. Going back to other questions, to look at diverse industries within agriculture. That's another diverse industry that I think we're seeing. I know I go to UGA and I have a number of horticulture professors who are doing some targeted research at some vertical farming, some hydroponic systems. And I think that's a whole water management solution that can be tapped. It's wonderful because it can be tapped in anywhere. I mean, you can do hydroponics in the northern area. And so I think that is a wonderful solution. I think in terms of a solution right now, I'm not sure how developed it is to be established everywhere, but I think that's certainly something that Farm Bureau can continue to advocate for research for, both on Capitol Hill and Atlanta, and kind of expand that industry, because the state of Georgia is growing, and we're losing our farmland by the day, and so investing in you know, vertical or dense agriculture is going to be a solution. If not now, then in some years ahead. And I think it's a wonderful water management technological advancement once again.
Yeah, so Michael, you were talking about you don't know if it's ready or not to be full on large scale. It's not. We will never be able to replace traditional farming, but it is an innovation that we can use in urban areas or just in your small household, where an aeroponic system saves 98% space and 90% less water. That's saving up to 2 birds, 1 stone kind of situation. And I love that. And it's easy to understand, it's easy for the kids, and it's easier to grow on as well.
I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention this during our discussion. Farm Bureau, I think, has been a really big backer of the EQIP program at the state or at the federal level through USDA, and that's the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. I know that's at the very beginning, you mentioned incentives. Do we not all enjoy incentives? I would love to get, you know, credits back into the water credit. I think they do a little bit of that, but I'm super thankful that Farm Bureau has really backed that, and I hope that we can continue to push the needle forward with that EQIP program. And that is, you know, through water, land, and other resources, but really on the water side, ensuring that, you know, our farmers are getting credit that they deserve for reserving that water and using quality water systems. So if you haven't had a chance to look into that, it's a really cool program. I only scratched the surface, I'm sure, but you know, we need to make sure we're talking to our state level public policy folks to ensure that they're reporting back to federal, so that we can keep this EQIP program going, because I know I really enjoy it.
And then Vincent, earlier you brought up that our water problem, it's a regional kind of problem you're talking about. And I think that's a great point to hit on, that we need to educate on which crops we need to grow where, because if a region in Georgia is drought prone, then we probably don't want to be growing corn there, which is a huge water sucker over there. So I think that's another important fact to hit on, I guess.
And you know, so that condition comes and goes. So the credit system hopefully would help out when you're having a bad year. A company like General Mills, who uses a good bit of water, they can, help subsidize that way.
See, it's just so interesting when people talk about water issues, because where I live in the state, we have 3 rivers that run through our county, so it's just like, so we, on the other side of water management, are really looking at that water tolerant varieties. So we have a bunch of farmers who use like the soybeans with the wet foot, or your water tolerant corn varieties whenever they're growing, because it's a lot of the low river flood, which is prone to flooding and all that. So it's kind of interesting.
Too much.
It's too much water around. Yeah, so it's funny how it's all different.
It's different ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
That water, creates an issue, or it can be an issue if you don't have so much. So it's doing this discussion, getting prepared for this discussion has actually educated me a little bit better. And I think that's the fun in it. We hit on earlier, mentioned the storage facilities. I think Michael said something about out west. If we were looking at federal storage facilities as far as water goes out west, only 2 of them would be invited to come to this conference, because most of them are 50 years or older. And I think when we talk about a region in Georgia where you have a bunch of rivers and things like that, you have infrastructure structures that help with
Time has been called. Please prepare your closing statements. I have the audience remain silent for 1 minute, to each better than their preparation. Please put your pencils down. And in a voluntary order, please stand up and give your 1 minute closing statement.
Vincent, I appreciated that you started off talking about water credits. I believe that is so important in the water hotly debated conversation, as we can tell today. Jack, local farm bureau meetings are at the core of my heart too, and I appreciated that you included that in the conversation. Getting on the local level is super important so that we can work our way up on all of these hotly debated issues. And Michael, honestly, I didn't even think of the port, and I should have. It should come to the top of my mind, but I appreciated that you tied that into our conversation, because that is something that I will continue to think about going forward. And lastly, Rachel, you had some great notes about emerging technologies and how really we don't always face the same issues. Some of us have too much water and some of us don't have enough. So that's something to think about going forward. And between all of the things that we discussed today, and including education, grant writing, and really just getting our elected officials from top to bottom to understand the needs of the farmers, and getting the farmers to understand the needs of the planet, are really going to help us move the needle forward and help farm Europe.
Well, I think we came up with so many different solutions today, and kind of try and wrap it all in together. You started off talking about drip irrigation, Rachel, and more technological advancements in hydroponics, Jack. And with some policy endeavors, things like water credits and investing in the resources that we have, that both you and Carly and Vincent brought up. But I think all of it rests at the heart of education. And I think that's where Farm Bureau can come into play. Educating not only our farmers about the technological innovations that have and continue to revolutionize our industry and make it more sustainable, but also educating in the legislative arena, our representatives who are tasked with making the policy that affects and creates these very solutions.
again, water is the most important natural resource that needs protecting. I'm honored to be up here with you guys. This was a great conversation. I think that in the future, we need to look into education and technology and all those things, but it comes to funding. One of the things that I didn't bring up was how we fund certain things with Farm Bureau. And I wouldn't mind seeing a roundup program. I know I'm introducing this in closing arguments, but instead of paying 35 a year, if I could pay 40, that roundup ends up creating a scholarship for an educational program that maybe somebody in Young Farmer and Rancher wants to head up. So thank you again for allowing me to discuss.
Georgia agriculture is constantly growing, and so we need to be able to keep up with how much water we're using and use as little as possible so we can grow more. And I think we came up with some great solutions today. Carly, I love how you brought up the education. I love education, teaching, giving more knowledge on the younger generations because they're the future. Rachel, you brought great points with irrigation in those large scales, and then also the different regions of Georgia. How much water we have here, how little water we have here. I love how you brought that up. And Michael, just like Carly said, I didn't even think about the ports or the exports, even though agriculture is our biggest industry. You would think that we would think of that, but I love that because it showed us just how important it is in our waterways, how important they are to us. And then Vince, you talked about our water credit for us, and then that roundup you were talking about as well. I think it's a great financial advantage that we can gain from Farm Bureau. And then also the advancement of technology is also huge in our agriculture world. And I think that is the future. Thank you.
Well, Vincent, Jack, Michael, Carly, thank you so much for an awesome conversation or discussion today. From everything from credits to the port, to grant systems, to education, to hydroponics. I think we all had a pretty much unified front on this is something we all need to unify and get behind, and especially with Farm Bureau locally and legislatively to manage our water systems. Thank y'all.
Let's show these competitors our appreciation for a job well done. If I could I get the judges to stand up and introduce yourself?
I'm Christy Mumford, District 7 Federation Manager.
Heather King, District 6 Federation Manager.
And I'll let y'all now leave to get the tabulation. Thank you. Let's thank them for their time.
I'm so glad we had a discussion because I was one of the people that didn't talk. So I was like terrified.
Yeah, I remember excited.
Not quite done, Rachel.
Oh, I'm so
So anyway, we would now like for each competitor to make a brief statement about themselves and their Farm Bureau experience in their connection to
Sorry. Well, my name is Carly Jones, as y'all know now. I am, and tell what we do, right?
Yeah, you know what you do.
Okay. Connection to agriculture, grew up on a farm. I am a 5th generation member of the Eccles family who owns and operates Taymore Farms up in Northeast Georgia. And I currently serve as their agritourism and marketing coordinator. So I handle anything from the events to the social media and website marketing, things like that. So it was a great time with y'all. Well, I'm Rachel Dunaway. We don't say our county, right? No, still don't. Okay, I grew up with livestock from beef cattle and sheep and goat operation, and my dad did a bunch of vegetable cropping growing up from squash and zucchini and so and watermelon. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, I was born and raised on a farm, and I'm currently an agriculture teacher.
Well, I'm Michael Howard, and I actually didn't grow up on a farm. Don't live on a farm now. Hope to one day. I got involved in FFA, my agriculture teacher, and started getting into it, and really found the value for the industry. So I'm studying agribusiness and econ right now. I'm at UGA. I'm thinking about going to law school, and hopefully also starting my own operation in the future.
My name is Jack Pringle. I'm going into my freshman year at Georgia Southern, and then I'll transfer into UGA's Ag Ed department. And I go around to local elementary schools and I create my own agriculture curriculum, and I teach it to them in a fun and engaging way. While also I create Ag Ed campuses. Basically, it's like a mini farm on their school campus with live animals, and we're growing 27 different varieties for the kids to see.
It's awesome. My name is Vincent Thomas. I'm honestly the closest I am to agriculture is being married to a young farmer teacher. She's over about 150 acres of farmland, and You know, she tells me what to do and I gotta do it. So, I enjoy doing that. Professionally, I work for Anderson Merchandising, which is, I just make all the product on the shelves look great.
Thank you, competitors. Taylor, thank you for ranking from this round and round two round robin, we use to determine the top 16 competitors who will, compete in the semifinal round discussion meeting. Then based solely on the scoring for the Sweet 16 round, the winner of